I confronted my friend over project issues. She thought I backed her while I secretly agreed with the others. Now I'm torn. Did I mislead her? Warning: this situation has evolved over approximately a month and a half and is being recounted by someone with a tendency toward excessive detail, so it is quite lengthy. I will provide updates as necessary, though I hope nothing further complicates matters. For context, I am an 18-year-old male, and I, along with 3 others, am engaged in a design project assigned for our college course this semester, which runs until April. We are tasked with creating a lamp and lampshade. We had the freedom to select our groups of 4, and I was approached by an individual I will refer to as Maria, who is 22 years old and female, about collaborating. I generally avoid working on group projects with friends to prevent any complexities in our relationships. While I admire Maria and hold her in high regard, we haven't really socialized outside of our classes, so I agreed to join her group. However, I later discovered that she had also invited my 2 closest college friends, who are also in this class, to participate in the group. By the time I learned about this, it was too late to make any changes, so I had to accept the situation. Maria quickly connected with my friends and me, and I have since considered her a friend as well. Nonetheless, I felt particularly anxious about working with one group member in particular, whom I will refer to as Liz, a 19-year-old female. There are many ways I could describe Liz, who is, by the way, a close and cherished friend of mine, but none may truly capture her essence, so I will attempt it. My friend Liz resembles Pinocchio, but instead of Geppetto carving wooden puppets, she fixes high-end gaming laptops. She is akin to the 2 elderly characters from The Muppet Show who succumbed to irony poisoning and returned in a distorted manner. Liz possesses the mentality of a 15-year-old player of Call of Duty Zombies, the physique of a cartoon character from a Seth MacFarlane series, and the spirit of a 3-minute Smosh sketch from 2008, with recent comments predominantly stating, "This didn't age well." In short, Liz is, from an objective standpoint, quite difficult. I anticipate that the term, objectively, will feature prominently in this post, and by the end of it, I will have used it enough times for it to lose its significance. Although she is good-natured, skilled in her crafts, and usually well-intentioned, she is often inconsiderate and self-involved, which leads her to irritate others and take pleasure in it when she believes they deserve it. She can be offensive, stubborn, and outright provocative at times, and is exceptionally resistant to compromise or change. According to her, her favorite pastimes include gaming, Transformers, and watching YouTube personalities get canceled for various scandals. She has a tendency to jump to conclusions and maintains a rather low regard for the feelings of others, often remaining unapologetic. Moreover, Liz and I frequently find ourselves at odds. Her sense of style and design is unique, and although I see beauty as subjective, we have virtually no agreement on aesthetics. She possesses many redeeming traits and has the potential to be a good friend. However, even if she's not an inherently bad person, she can be problematic to collaborate with professionally. Therefore, I wanted to avoid any scenarios that could risk our friendship during this project, or conversely, allow our friendship to threaten the project's success. Additionally, due to some serious family matters, I informed my group that I would not be able to contribute as actively to the design process, promising to compensate during the construction phase. This was primarily due to external factors, but internally, I also sought to avoid conflict with Liz regarding design, anticipating that our disagreements would burden the other 2 group members. They all expressed understanding of my situation, so I let it be. Though I anticipated some degree of trouble from her, I hoped the other 2 group members could manage Liz, despite her complexities. Furthermore, I remember thinking that it was just a lamp. It likely wouldn't be a major issue under the circumstances. How naive I was. Never again will I underestimate the emotional weight that lighting fixtures can possess. In all seriousness, I did not expect how completely Liz would dominate the entire project. She became extraordinarily zealous about our lamp, showing uncontrollable enthusiasm, adamant that our group's design needed to align precisely with her vision, disregarding any input from others and consistently labeling their designs as objectively ugly or objectively not attractive, refusing to compromise regardless of the circumstances. This behavior alone was already concerning, But complicating matters further was that her suggestions did not even adhere to the project's assignment guidelines. She had spent most of the class time gaming or sleeping at home and had neglected to review the instructions, choosing instead to pursue her own agenda against the rest of our group's input. We attempted to explain why her proposals were inadequate, but she dismissed us and submitted her designs on our behalf, insisting that the professors would appreciate how objectively impressive our lamp design was. Consequently, our group faced reprimands from the professors in front of the entire class for failing to follow the guidelines because we did not follow the instructions. Understandably, the other two group members, Maria and Spencer, an 18-year-old male, were displeased with this situation. Until that point, neither had felt comfortable confronting Liz. Maria was still getting acquainted with us, and Spencer is notably shy and conflict-averse, while Liz reacts to criticism like a storm brews in a hurricane. However, with our project's integrity now at risk, and by extension their GPAs, they started taking a more proactive approach. They both presented designs to the professors that incorporated elements from various members' suggestions and visual input, and more importantly, adhered to the project brief. This work had been prepared already. It was not submitted previously because Liz had dismissed them as objectively unattractive, despite multiple revisions that accommodated her tastes, which ultimately led to futility. After evaluating the alternatives, our professors selected Maria's design on behalf of the group instead of Liz's, commending it as lovely, sleek, and notably stating that it actually fulfilled the assignment brief we provided you. Naturally, the professor's decision disappointed Liz, and she tried to persuade us to ignore their input and proceed with her design instead, claiming it was the only objectively good-looking option, and that they would marvel at the project's aesthetic once completed. We reiterated that the issue was not about appearance, but she did not grasp that and took the news quite hard. I found myself conflicted, since I had not contributed much himself to the project, feeling it would be hypocritical to confront her. While I found Maria's design somewhat mundane for my personal standards, I acknowledged its necessity to meet the brief and believed it could be made creatively engaging if executed well. Meanwhile, Liz continued to resist, derogatorily calling the alternative designs objectively ugly, objectively foolish, end quote, objectively horrendously unattractive and dull and inherently inferior to my lamp, which is the only objectively impressive creation anyone in that ridiculous class has produced. I secretly searched online to see if the meanings of objectively and subjectively had somehow been reversed without my notice. They had not. On a lighter note, here's some additional context regarding my relationship with Liz. We are currently in our freshman year at a well-regarded design university, and our class is rather small. Everyone shares the same courses, and we are all acquainted. Over the past semester and a half, Liz has become somewhat of a divisive figure within the freshman cohort. She is not a social outcast, but many students, particularly the upperclassmen, view her as immature yet harmless, though few are eager to partner with her. She routinely disregards instructions, often plays the role of vocal dissenter, and is indifferent to how her actions inconvenience those around her whenever her desires become involved. The persona she projects sends a clear message, whether she realizes it or not, and she has not cultivated many friendships since the semester began. I initially reached out to her, recognizing she appeared to struggle with the transition to college, and discovered she and I shared several interests. Having taken the time to learn about her over the past semester and a half, I found that although she is very, objectively difficult, she is not an inherently malicious person. She simply lacks natural empathy and grapples with anger issues. Her relatively troubled upbringing has contributed to a defensive mentality, leading her to adopt a me versus them perspective, not out of bad intentions. Frequently, when she makes a comment, she does so without realizing the impact she has on others or lacks awareness of an alternate approach. The unfortunate reality is that few take the initiative to try and help her understand how her actions might offend others, given how resistant and rude she can be, which leads people to either abandon her or retaliate in kind. Such behavior only reinforces her anger and suspicion of others, while stifling the empathy she already struggles to exhibit. Consequently, she does not often view others as individuals, rationalizing her opinions as representations of objective reality. Understanding this, she does not intentionally aim to offend her peers. She simply believes her design is superior to theirs and aims to be candid, disregarding how it affects them. Because she comes off as antagonistic to many people in our tight-knit school, I felt a compelling desire to connect with her and aid her. Having been ostracized myself in the past, I strive not to witness anyone left isolated, even if for justifiable reasons. I believe most individuals are capable of positive change. A significant part of my motivation stems from her need for friendship and validation. Since I began supporting her, she has made tremendous strides toward improvement, benefiting from those willing to provide her with honest feedback and patience during her outbursts instead of simply expressing anger and leaving her abandoned, which, admittedly, they have every right to do. Though it requires considerable effort to assist her, when she acknowledges her mistakes, she is genuinely remorseful and committed to change, despite her residual belief that she doesn't need to alter her behavior. Part of me admires that level of authenticity and confidence. Though I have not known her for long, my concern for her extends beyond friendship. She resembles a sister or cousin to me, and she has aided me in numerous ways during my own struggles. While we may rarely agree and hold differing perspectives, she is unwaveringly loyal, perpetually honest, and possesses genuine design talent, albeit limited by her short attention span and weak interpersonal skills. Just to provide some context, while I feel immense frustration with her behavior at present, it is partly due to how much I care about her, and I truly want to help her improve and demonstrate the amazing individual she can become. I have conveyed my feelings to her, and while she occasionally resists my help or advice, she has expressed appreciation for my support, even requesting guidance on occasion, and has assured me she will inform me if I cross any boundaries. I realize this is an extensive amount of background information. Does Reddit even have a concept of purple prose? And I regret disclosing her personal matters online. But these are my sincere thoughts regarding her, and I believe understanding her is essential for contextualizing the situation, since it is easy to dismiss her as simply rude. Returning to the project, my close bond with Liz, coupled with my willingness to be patient with her, has allowed me to remain composed throughout these challenges. However, the same cannot be said for Spencer and Maria. There are only so many times one can endure hearing their work referred to as objectively unattractive before frustration boils over. At first, both expressed a desire to befriend Liz. Maria took the initiative to reach out first, and Spencer had also established some familiarity with her during the previous semester. However, their demeanor toward Liz has shifted considerably, particularly Maria's. As a transfer student older than us, she displays less tolerance for the immature antics that Liz regularly exhibits. When Liz announced her intention to redesign our project yet again in an effort to sway the professors, Maria conveyed her loss of faith in Liz's ability to do so, asserting it was unnecessary since the professors had already endorsed the alternative design, which Liz passionately disapproved of. Both Spencer and I concurred that we should simply proceed with the selected design. Liz responded with anger and lashed out at all three of us. Tensions escalated to such a degree between her and Maria that I felt compelled to intervene before it truly jeopardized our project. While I care for Liz immensely, I am also concerned about my grade, which inclined me to side with Maria, and Liz's immaturity was becoming increasingly burdensome. Before things escalated into a full-blown conflict, I discreetly reached out to Maria and Spencer separately from Liz, inquiring about their desired course of action moving forward. Maria opted to abandon any attempts to seek Liz's approval and asserted that we should not place our project at risk with her involvement, especially since she had shown no willingness to engage with the project parameters. Meanwhile, Spencer expressed hesitance to confront Liz directly, yet agreed that we could no longer accommodate her demands, especially since ignoring reason meant our project violated the brief. Though they conveyed empathy for Liz on a personal level, we all agreed that risking a critical class was not worthwhile. Ultimately, we decided that contacting the professors might be necessary, informing them of Liz's obstruction and requesting that they assess our project accordingly or separate our group if feasible. I earnestly considered this, as I felt anger too. However, approaching the professors without discussing it with Liz would undoubtedly damage her already fragile relationships with Maria, as well as undermine her trust in both Spencer and myself. If our group couldn't be dissolved, it would create an exasperating atmosphere over the coming months for everyone involved. Liz proves challenging to collaborate with even when she appreciates those around her. But her attitude becomes outright antagonistic when she feels wronged, especially when actions are taken behind her back. At this moment, I began to question whether I might also be acting like an irresponsible person by discussing the situation behind Liz's back with Maria and Spencer. I was afraid that if I remained silent, they would proceed to address the matter with the professors independently, something they absolutely had the right to do. This potential outcome would adversely affect Liz's grade in a crucial course for our major, which could result in her needing to repeat the year or take summer classes. While informing the professors might temporarily resolve our dilemma, it would come at the expense of Liz's academics and her relationships with both us and the broader class, reinforcing her negative view that others are out to undermine her, while making it even more difficult for her to cultivate friendships. Given our small cohort, we are all likely to be entangled for the foreseeable future. If Liz fails to adjust her behavior, the dynamic could degrade drastically. She has already engaged in verbal confrontations with classmates multiple times, though, in her defense, the counterpart was usually at fault. I really wish to prevent that, but Liz's current conduct is unacceptable and cannot continue unaddressed. Consequently, I consulted Spencer and Maria, and they agreed to allow me one final attempt to communicate with Liz. However, if she remained unwilling to amend her approach, we would escalate our concerns to a professor. Both tend to keep their feelings hidden, but from our discussions, it was evident they were genuinely affected personally. And during conversations with them, I raised the question of how we would proceed with Liz. I am uncertain whether they genuinely intended to discuss the matter with the professors before I initiated dialogue. Thus, my being proactive could have influenced their decision. Regardless, when I broached this topic, they expressed interest in taking action, and perhaps I had unwittingly suggested the idea. Spencer volunteered to reach out to the professor, reasoning that a complaint from me would be perceived as nagging and one from Maria as malicious. But to my knowledge, the three of us were all contemplating raising the issue and collaboratively developing that strategy. I told Liz that we needed to discuss the situation with the lamp privately and braced myself for confrontation. My attempt to communicate with her did not unfold as smoothly as I had hoped, though it did exceed my expectations. We engaged in a 10-minute shouting match, but eventually, as I genuinely raised my voice and conveyed to her that we might have to involve the professors to separate us and her behavior was genuinely damaging our friendship, as well as her connection with Spencer, which she also values. She became noticeably quiet. I typically strive for optimistic resolutions to conflicts, and I think my expressions of anger or hurt were unexpected for her. Afterward, she apologized, enabling us to have a constructive discourse. She shared her loyalty to her design and felt ownership over our group's potential lamp since she had invested so much effort into it, which was indeed true, as she had created the plans independently. She regarded her harsh critiques of her peers' work as brutal honesty, believing it superior to deceptive praise. Additionally, she perceived the three of us as being less invested in the project than she was, reflecting on how frequently our responses to her updates were not timely enough for her to implement changes. These were legitimate concerns. I validated her feelings, apologized for some of our communication lapses, but emphasized that standing out for not adhering to guidelines was not the kind of standing out we aspired to, that her brutal honesty was hurting others' feelings and hindering collaboration, and that we all aimed to produce a commendable project as well. If she felt strongly about her vision for this project, however, she would have to acknowledge that it jeopardized our relationships and risked punitive repercussions. Thankfully, this resonated with her. She confirmed that she did not believe the lamp was worth endangering both our grades and our friendships. Recognizing how her words had affected others, she expressed willingness to adjust her approach. She apologized, and everything appeared to be smoothing over from that point onward. Liz still resorts to using objectively, to explain personal opinions and views, but that is tolerable to me. I recognize when I'm being pedantic. During our conversation, Liz mistakenly believed that Spencer and Maria were the ones seeking to escalate the situation to the professors, and that I was her defender. In truth, it was the three of us who collectively reached this conclusion. However, I was conscious that disclosing this fact to her would provoke defensiveness and undermine our progress. Therefore, I consciously chose to withhold the truth from her at that moment, intending to discuss it honorably later. This allowed her to relax, apologize, and she has since become more receptive to collaborating with us, or at least with me. Unfortunately, this might have negatively impacted her friendship with Spencer and certainly strained her relationship with Maria, whom she likely suspects of prompting the contact with the professors. While there is no overt animosity, it is clear that the rapport between them has dulled. They are now a great deal more cautious regarding trust in her contributions. Conversely, I appear to have evaded repercussions in Liz's perspective. If anything, our relationship has strengthened because she believes I defended her and recognizes my willingness to support her, which is, in part, accurate, but not entirely. In the week since these events unfolded, I have been troubled by the outcome. Although things concluded relatively positively, I cannot shake the feeling that my approach was unfair to all three group members. Liz mistakenly believes I stood by her when, in reality, I fully aligned with both Spencer and Maria regarding the decisions that were made about the professors. Moreover, I was the one who first raised the idea of reaching out to the professors, even if sparked by the concern that my peers would do so independently. It feels as though Maria has assumed the role of Liz's scapegoat in this situation. And while she does play a role in the conflict and is primarily concerned with simply finishing the project, it weighs on me since the bulk of responsibility lies with me rather than with them. Initially, I envisioned myself as a neutral mediator, but upon reflection, I recognized that my negligence was instrumental to the series of events that occurred. To clarify, it is indeed accurate that Liz puts in more effort into this project than we currently do, and it is undeniable that we haven't responded to her messages promptly. I have outlined my reasons for retreating from this project, but Spencer and Maria similarly have valid justifications. Spencer has a lengthy commute to school, requiring him to leave relatively early to catch his train home, while Maria is juggling 2 jobs to finance her education, often working shifts stretching to 5 in the morning every day. All three of us commute to the college, as it is situated in a city characterized by soaring rents and heavy traffic, causing our travel times to vary from 10 minutes to 2.5 hours based on traffic, delays, etc. In contrast, Liz lives very close to campus and has no significant commitments apart from her studies, allowing her the luxury of time to dedicate to various projects compared to us. While I am not as busy as the others, I still live in relative proximity, with a 20 to 40-minute commute depending on traffic. And although I face some family responsibilities, I am currently not working a job. Spencer is in a similar situation, but his commute is the longest, covering between 1.5 hours and 2.5 hours. Contingent on train delays, walking to the station at early hours can pose safety concerns. However, out of the three of us, I am the second best qualified to engage with the project. I have the most time flexibility. And certainly, I could have been more actively involved and responsive to Liz indicating that I, ironically, was the least engaged despite having more free time than the other two. Had I participated more actively in earlier discussions, it's possible I could have persuaded Liz to cooperate before tensions escalated to their current state. Ultimately, my contribution to this project is the least significant as I effectively remained absent for several weeks. Nevertheless, I find myself torn over whether to confess the truth about my omission and take accountability for my role in this dilemma. Technically, I did not lie, but I also certainly did not reveal the entirety of the truth. While the dynamics among the group members have not drastically shifted and the situation has improved, it gnaws at me that the blame rests on the shoulders of my other group members rather than myself. The more I ponder my actions, the more I fear that everything I've done so far has inadvertently been manipulative to the team. I am beginning to realize I may have concealed my resentment towards Liz under the guise of the three of us. while also positioning myself advantageously to appear trustworthy to her, despite being the one to initiate the conversation about how to address her behavior without her knowledge. For all I know, neither Spencer nor Maria intended to reach out to the professors until I agitated the conversation, and through my efforts to protect Liz, I effectively not only planted the concept in their minds but also made them accountable in her eyes for taking such action. I am concerned this may reflect an underlying inclination towards superiority and self-interest regarding both my social life and the project, which would be unkind. Moral dilemmas aside, revealing the truth may have tangible repercussions for this project. Things have calmed considerably, and addressing her now could disrupt our collaborative efforts, particularly if Liz feels isolated in her trust. Given the elapsed time, clarifying my stance would make it starkly apparent that I deliberately allowed her to misinterpret my role to improve my standing at that moment. But I also recognize that my silence has contributed to the overall deterioration of trust. I am confident Liz will eventually reconcile with the others, most likely with Spencer, and if Maria doesn't mind her feelings toward Liz as long as work is completed. In that case, my choice to remain silent may only serve to benefit me. Yet I feel morally obligated not to allow the other 3 group members to shoulder the emotional weight of an issue I undoubtedly helped create. So, am I in the wrong for resolving the situation with my friend in a misleading, albeit unintended, self-serving manner to spare her from serious consequences? Should I divulge the truth, fully aware of the potential fallout? Summary: one of my friends was uncooperative during our group project, and I intervened to prevent her from facing severe repercussions. During this process, she misinterpreted the actions of others in a way that benefited me, and while I did not lie, I did not disclose the full truth to prevent an explosion. As a result, matters were settled and the project is progressing more smoothly. However, my other group members now bear some of the blame for decisions I contributed to. If I tell Liz the truth, our improved situation may unravel. Am I wrong for not being forthright with Liz to ease tensions, inadvertently putting my other friends in an undesirable position? Should I address the truth, despite the possible negative impact on our project and relationships? Story 2. I broke up with my first boyfriend after realizing our values clashed, and he dismissed my ambitions, leaving me feeling drained. I, 18 female, recently ended a relationship with my first boyfriend, 19 male. It was relatively brief, lasting only about 4 to 5 months. I would attribute the breakup to poor timing, as we are both in our final year of high school and will soon be heading off to university, which felt overwhelming early on. We were faced with the prospect of a long-distance relationship soon after becoming involved, placing an unusual amount of pressure on us both. This is the explanation I've been giving to others when they inquire about the reason behind our breakup. However, the truth is that there were multiple factors at play. We became friends at the beginning of the school year. He moved to my city from another location and had a girlfriend back home, so at first, we maintained a platonic friendship. He eventually broke up with his girlfriend after admitting his feelings for me, which was when we began dating. Since it was my first romantic relationship, I was unsure about my desires or what I wanted out of it. I promised myself I would gradually figure it all out, as I had committed to exploring new experiences and stepping outside my comfort zone during my last 2 years of high school. Unfortunately, I misunderstood what this meant in practice and compromised some of my personal values to keep him happy. This, naturally, was detrimental to our relationship. Although I do not come from a Catholic family, I switched schools several times as a child due to struggles with my mental health. Eventually, I found myself attending a Catholic school, which turned out to be incredibly beneficial for me, and I am deeply grateful for that experience. This motivated me to learn about the faith and ultimately embrace it. Consequently, I came to hold views such as refraining from sexual activity before marriage and opposing masturbation. I have always had a somewhat conservative outlook on these matters, and having a rationale to support my hesitations brought me comfort, as it allowed me to justify my reluctance to engage in sexual activities. However, I recall discussing these beliefs with my mother, who argued that sex is a crucial part of any relationship, serving as a test of compatibility. While I recognized the validity of her perspective, I wasn't in a relationship at that time, nor did I foresee being in one soon, so I dismissed it for the most part. When I began dating him and he broached the topic of sex before marriage, I responded that I was unsure and would consider it only if it felt right. This response unsettled me, but since my mother is usually correct in her observations, I thought my feelings might evolve as I got to know him better. Unfortunately, they did not. Whenever we attempted anything physical, it felt painful, unenjoyable, or like I was only participating because I knew he wanted me to. As time passed, I ceased to consent and simply stopped voicing my objections. Despite this, he continuously expected physical intimacy, to the point where he preferred visiting my house instead of engaging in outings in town. One day, I remarked to him, "Why would anyone engage in casual sex without using protection?" and asserted that I would never have sex with anyone without a condom. Then one day, while we were alone together, he mentioned that he had purchased a condom and thought we should. Although I never explicitly agreed, I went along with it until I ultimately backed out, expressing my genuine reluctance. I was in tears, apologizing for making him believe I could go that far, but I just couldn't. He comforted me, reassuring me that it was okay, and I managed to compose myself. Shortly after, he asked me to perform oral sex. We had previously discussed this, and I had firmly stated, I would never do that, as I just don't like the idea. I understand some people find it enjoyable, but it's not for me. Naturally, I found it difficult to comply. However, he persistently asked, leading me to eventually message him, declaring that I wasn't happy with any of this and wanted to cease our physical activities. He acknowledged my feelings but didn't change his behavior after that. When we began discussing university applications, I submitted applications to several universities in Scotland. I am from England, and he repeatedly voiced concerns that they were too far away and costly to visit. He would attempt to downplay the merits of those institutions to dissuade me from choosing them. On one occasion during a break, I expressed my excitement about potentially sharing a room with one of my best friends when he reacted angrily, saying, "What about me?" as he was anxious about how he would manage visits. He also expressed frustration when I declared that I didn't want to study during my break, especially after I had recently told him I preferred to use my free periods to concentrate on my academic pursuits. That particular week, I had just completed my interviews for Oxford University and was eager for a break, wanting to look forward to my future. I aimed to pursue research since I love learning and studying. Whenever I shared this with him, he would argue that my motivation stemmed from my parents instilling in me the belief that life entails studying and obtaining good grades, thereby trapping me in a toxic cycle that contributed to my stress, which is certainly true, as school can be overwhelming. I would often vent about my mother and the indirect pressure she placed on me through her judgmental nature. He would frequently insist that my mother didn't express love, and I was almost convinced by his assertion. Yes, my mother may struggle at times to show her affection, but she does love me, and I am certain of that. Ultimately, his refusal to acknowledge how important academics were to me and the joy I derived from them, despite the stress, made me feel as though he disregarded my aspirations. Gradually, he drained the excitement from my future plans as I found myself preoccupied over his emotions. I expressed this concern, and he became alarmed, fearing I might break up with him. He began to show his distress, saying things like, "Go find someone who cares less. I guess I'm just worthless," and so forth. To provide context, this reaction, though, in my opinion, excessive, was perhaps understandable considering that around 2 months into our relationship, I was preparing for my Oxford interviews, feeling intensely stressed, while he was submitting his university applications, and was equally overwhelmed as he struggled with the decision of what course to pursue, or whether he even wanted to go to university. Throughout this ordeal, he frequently spoke about how he would visit me, intentionally applying to universities near my location. I had already submitted applications for early action. I felt uncomfortable with him altering his entire life and, consequently, ours so early in our relationship. So I suggested he apply to the institutions he genuinely preferred, and we could determine later if we were able to manage the distance. However, he didn't heed this advice, and every night he would message me asking for reassurances that I would never leave him and that I loved him, which often consumed 2 to 3 hours of my night that I needed for preparing for my interviews, which he was aware of. I began to view this behavior as somewhat selfish, especially after it continued for 5 consecutive nights. One evening during an argument, he said, "Fine, then just say we're broken up," and so I did. However, we reconciled afterward when I apologized, explaining that it had been an impulsive decision fueled by my stress and that I should have communicated better regarding my needs. I tried to hint several times about my worries surrounding the interviews and my need for focused preparation, but he seemed to forget by the end of the day. Admittedly, I could have been more straightforward in asking him to stop being so demanding, but I felt that would be unfair. This time, I was truly attempting to discuss our issues. I aimed to air out all our misunderstandings. I explained that late-night calls made me feel rushed in the mornings and that I preferred waking up early. I conveyed that I didn't want to see him every weekend and that I didn't require that level of attention. I reiterated my desire to refrain from sexual activities. I had tried to explain this multiple times, but I now understood it simply wasn't for me. However, he responded by questioning how he could ever trust me. I found that to be an absurd question. Trust is essential, and without it, the relationship simply wouldn't work. I felt as though I could not balance my aspirations with his expectations, which he often failed to recognize, making me feel I had to suppress my goals around him. This conversation dragged on for hours, during which I calmly explained my feelings while he expressed his frustration in an aggressive tone. Afterwards, I suggested we meet up, not wishing to return to school on bad terms. When we met, he sulked throughout our time together. I attempted to maintain a positive demeanor, but while browsing a store together, he was on the phone with a friend. He complained, saying, "It happened again," implying I had ruined everything. This deeply upset me. We talked about our situation, and he conveyed that I simply wasn't prepared for a relationship. While he claimed his heart wanted to remain in the relationship, he also asserted that in his mind we were incompatible. I could not deny he was correct. We lacked alignment. I was incredibly driven, while he seemed lackadaisical, which left me exhausting myself to keep our connection alive. Yet we shared numerous wonderful moments, leading to my internal conflict. Upon returning home, I called him. He disclosed that his friends suggested we should break up and that he felt uncertain about what to feel. I tried to discuss our concerns with him, offering advice, which he indicated was helpful. He mentioned that his sole goal in life was to get married. Although I acknowledged that marriage is a significant milestone, achieving it isn't particularly difficult. What is challenging is choosing the right person and ensuring longevity in the relationship. I illustrated how my passion for running became burdensome when I set an overwhelming goal of competing at Division I for UCLA. Suddenly, the joy was lost, and it transformed into mere pain. I asserted that the same principle applied to relationships. If achieving marriage was your only focus, it would detract from the enjoyment of the relationship and the present moment. The following day, I admit I acted a bit distant. During lunch, he asked if I wanted to walk with him to the tram stop, which I declined, saying, "I want to have lunch with my friends." He left in anger. While on the bus, I checked my phone and saw a series of messages where he expressed confusion and distress over our relationship. I clarified that I wanted to spend time with my friends, as we were together quite a bit at school, and I often wished for more individual time with them. I believed school should be treated as a workplace, which meant we shouldn't excessively interact as a couple within that environment. He responded with hostility, telling me to leave, and that I was useless. I calmly explained that I was still grappling with the fact that he had indicated he wanted to end things. He accused me of playing the victim, followed by a slew of derogatory terms. Throughout this, I maintained my composure. I called him and dared him to say the same things directly to my face, but he couldn't. So, at that moment, I made the decision to break up with him. I was exhausted from constantly treating him with kindness and respect, trying my best to fulfill all his desires while overlooking my own needs. I approached him feeling deeply upset and distressed only for him to twist the conversation to focus on himself, attempting to engage me in a heated argument. He insisted that we weren't broken up and told me to reach out if I needed to vent. You may not know me, but I struggle to express anger. Instead, it manifests as deep sadness. Afterward, I confided in my parents about everything, and my dad was furious. Later, I communicated again with him, affirming it was over. Surprisingly, he responded understandingly and remained very calm. He even accompanied me to the bus stop, and we shared a genuine laugh, prompting me to think this was as positive as it could get given the circumstances. We both agreed to stay connected to monitor each other's progress down the line. Recently, I deleted my Snapchat account, as I don't use it often. I feared he might interpret this as being blocked, but I believed it was irrelevant since he could still reach out to me on Instagram or Discord. However, I recently discovered that he had blocked me on all platforms. He hadn't done this at first, and has been bad-mouthing me to my friends, despite their consistent kindness toward him. He often behaved rudely toward my friends and coerced me into prioritizing him over them, even if he didn't intend to. After all this, I have never spoken ill of him to anyone outside my circle of close friends. I've tried to keep the situation drama-free. Yet now he gives me disdainful glares in school, with his friends joining in. Other girls have started labeling him as toxic, leading me to question how widespread this negative perception has become. I just want to find a way to assert myself. Recently, I messaged him, saying, "Sorry for not informing you sooner, but I deleted my Snapchat account. Feel free to contact me on Instagram if you ever need anything." I was attempting to feign ignorance of the situation, hoping to elicit some sympathy from him. He left me on read. Now I'm upset, especially since when he reached out, I took the time to explain my reluctance toward a relationship, emphasizing that our conflicting values made it the wrong time for us. I have apologized profusely for what feels like inconsequential reasons. I've now learned he's been speaking poorly of me to others, which truly distresses me. Is there anything I can do to defend myself, or should I simply let it go since I'll be leaving school soon? He has the potential to harm my reputation, and I don't want him to tarnish my final year at a school that has been incredibly rewarding for me.